Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about increasing agility by understanding risk. So it's about increasing the rate of change in a safe and controlled way. So I'm going to start with a bit of an overview, and then I'll give you a demo of a tool I've been working on that I think can help. I'm probably a bit short, so feel free to jump in any time with any questions. I'll go into a bit more detail. I'm just going to cover, sort of gloss over some of the background of this, and then get on to the good bit, which is hopefully the demo. So first, who am I? Well, my name is Croome. I've been either a developer or an infrastructure engineer in the financial industry for pretty much 20 years now. So until last week, recently unemployed. So when I'm talking through my slides, I use we a lot. Please take that in the past tense. So I've been working in heavily regulated environments. So PCI audits, SOX audits, but despite that, I've had 2 large Puppet deployments. So this talk will cover a lot about what I think of it. So why Puppet? Well, it's about infrastructure as code. So it gives you accuracy, consistency, instrumentation, testability, reproducibility. But it can also save you money. So to give a recent example, we had a large project to re-platform a critical piece of infrastructure for us, basically an ERP system. I won't give the company's name. We had very limited timescale to deliver it, so our Puppet infrastructure wasn't going to be ready in time. So we spec'd it out using the traditional waterfall method. We found that we couldn't deliver it in time. So we did go back to using Puppet. We were able to, it turned out to be a huge success. We were able to deliver the project in half the amount of time, and it took us half the amount of effort. So apart from saving money, it's about velocity. So it's all about faster change, so faster delivery of business value, so faster return on investment. So to take my ERP example, very expensive hardware, IBM hardware, software licenses. That's all wasted resources until it's put into production. So, don't have effort, licenses, hardware sitting around doing that. So, configuration management is only part of the solution. So, Puppet is just a tool. To be most effective, it needs to be part of a larger change of processes and culture. So, things like agile, continuous delivery, possibly even DevOps, whatever that means. So hopefully these aren't new topics. I won't go into any detail, but I'd just like to quickly review continuous delivery and how it might apply to Puppet. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with this book, Jez Humboldt, David Farley from ThoughtWorks. Excellent book. It's about bringing some concepts from agile development through to delivery. And to take my ERP example, we were able to get a minimal sort of viable product up and out to the development teams very quickly, and then we could keep iterating over that as we needed to. So we were able to sort of compress the periods by getting more people involved at an earlier stage. So it's about shorter development cycles, quicker feedback, and ultimately quicker delivery. So the book talks about 4 sort of rules, to determine whether or not you're doing continuous delivery. So the first one is to keep your software deployable. So it's about committing small bits of working tested code, decomposing larger problems into smaller bits of code, and committing more often. It's about making sure that your code is always deployable. So don't leave the repository in an undeployable state. So don't go home with broken tests. Ensure you keep a good base to build on, especially when you're working in a large team. And it's about transparency of changes and test results. So I'd go a little bit further and say, well, transparency of the requirement. What problem are you trying to solve? So it's putting everything out there in the open. Things like your delivery schedules and things like that. And it's all about automation. So being able to deploy your code any version of your code to any environment at the push of a button. So that's essentially continuous delivery, but it's a set of practices that is enabled by a tool set. So, Puppet is just code. It's, infrastructure as code. So agile and continuous delivery practices work very well with it. So, done well, it reduces the cost of making change. So, the only way is automation. So less bugs, less effort. And just like Puppet, start small. So with Puppet, you start with automating something like sudoers. Start with version control and maybe some basic CI tests, and then start building out your artifacts and maybe your deployment pipeline. But it's also key to start this right at the outset of your project. So get used to these processes and build on them as you learn more about them. And it's about faster return on investment. Your servers and new features can't add any value until they're in production. And so if we're talking about increasing the rate of change, how does this apply to risk? So I'm just curious, how many of you come from ITIL environments where you require change tickets? And yeah. So good. Hopefully this will be of some interest. Planning weeks in advance for tickets. So risk as it comes to continuous delivery and public changes. So these are the same benefits from agile development applied to delivering public code. So if you're batching up bigger changes to fit into maintenance windows, things like that, there is these changes take longer to integrate. They're often late. And by late I mean that the business want these benefits sooner than you're able to deliver them. And they're difficult to debug, when you're batching up multiple changes. If you can switch to a more sort of continuous, rapid continuous delivery methodology, then you're doing smaller changes. They're easier to test, easier to troubleshoot, and to deploy. And they deliver value much more quickly, with less risk. So, if it hurts, do it more often. So, if it's difficult to release changes, just keep doing it more often, and it'll get better, right? Keep iterating over your processes. So automate wherever you can. Processes that you can't automate, like approvals, try and streamline. And I bet if you're raising tons of change tickets because you've got automated processes for change tickets, the guys who are doing the approvals, they're going to want to have those approvals streamlined. So again, controls are very, very important in many environments, especially highly regulated ones. So visibility and transparency are key. A lot of this is about gaining credibility over time, especially in the larger environments. So change management, obvious control. So many of us will already tier by environment. So for example, development in UAT, we might not need change control for or approval for. But should you still use that same process for your dev and UAT environments? Should you raise change tickets even though you might not require approval? Why not? Show off your change lifecycle. From the request, the peer review, the test results, and dry run output. And keep metrics of your successes and failures. This will come back to help you later, especially if you can show that you're reducing the rate of failure. Separation of duties. So, I don't think this conflicts with continuous delivery. Continuous delivery gives the business the choice whether or not to deploy your change. IT is just enabling that option. One point is that you need to be careful to maintain responsibility for your deployment. So if an engineer has coded up a change, they want to see it pushed through to production, make sure that they're not going to over the fence. That it doesn't become an ops problem, because then you're probably going to start seeing some weaker judgment when it comes to deploying the change. And lastly, audit. So, I mean, automation is a great way to reduce the time spent on audits. So, for example, if you can show automation, your sample sizes are likely to be lower when you do get audited. So, auditors love automation. So, again, the key is to be transparent and to show off what you've done and show off the controls that you put in place. So, I'd just like to take you through a workflow that we've been working on, just to kind of tie all of this together. It's not finished, iterative process, but our goals are to increase transparency, encourage adoption, and to increase our rate of change. So this is it in a nutshell. Don't worry, I'll zoom in a sec. So the top bar is kind of your standard sort of CI, get the change delivered. And then the bottom bit, which I think is a bit more interesting and a lot more challenging, is about how you actually get that release out across the environment. So first, we'll get a new requirement coming into the team, either a bug report or a new feature request. We'll raise a Jira ticket. So we've decided to use the Atlassian tool suite, so Jira, Bamboo, and Stash. So Stash being the Git front end. Jira is pretty good at helping us plan our sprints and keeping track of the issues through to deployment. So an engineer will pick up a ticket, start working on it. Through Jira, they're able to click a button. It will, depending on whether it's a bug or a new feature request, it will branch off the right branch point and create a development sandbox for them. We use dynamic environments in Puppet, so it will automatically make that his checkout of the code available on the development Puppet masters, which he can run tests against. We use the Git flow branching model, which basically allows us to, while we might be working on a feature, if we've got an emergency bug fix we need to get in, we're able to leapfrog over that feature request and deploy without releasing that new feature. As soon as the engineer thinks he's done with his code, we'll ask him to submit a pull request. This will go through some automated testing, but we do a code review. We kind of loosely enforce a no selfies rule. So basically, don't merge your own pull request. For our CI testing, so we use the roles and profiles paradigm. So we will, we don't test incremental changes. We'll basically just loop through all of our roles and we'll spin up new VMs and roll, and basically do full CI testing on each of our roles. And when all those tests pass, Bamboo will automatically tag the release and deploy it to our UAT and production Puppet masters. So, up until this point, I think it's sort of continuous delivery, but it's not continuous deployment. So we still have a step. There's no servers that have been updated to use the new version of our Puppet code yet. That is the bottom bar. So, all of our tests have passed. So in theory, we could just roll out this release across the environment. But I think in practice, there's probably a bit of reluctance to say, well, do I have utmost confidence that the tests that I wrote are going to cover every eventuality? So we found that we wanted to have something a little bit extra. So we wanted to make sure that we understood exactly what was going to happen if we rolled out that release. So basically, we'll go into a web interface, we'll select a release, and basically do an impact analysis. So this is the tool called Gonzo that I'll demo in a minute. But essentially, it automates the impact analysis, giving an overview of what will change, and allows us to assign risk to those changes so that we can manage change control and deployment appropriately. I'll come back to that. once we know exactly what's going to change, we also want to automate the scheduling and change management. So, now that we've moved away from making manual changes to servers to automated changes to servers, we don't want to transfer that effort into manually managing change tickets and rescheduling changes. So, if we can automate the change management, that gives us a great opportunity to link back to all the sort of test evidence that we've got, the original the code changes, the peer review, and it's about giving the visibility and sort of gaining the trust of the people that would normally say, try and hold us back, I suppose, when we're trying to do these changes more rapidly. Once we've got an approved change ticket, deployment's really easy. We just update the ENC to say, this group of nodes gets this new version and trigger a puppet run. Reporting is very important here. As soon as there's the option to reschedule a change or to reject it, that's going to happen. People are going to start falling behind. And we're then back at the problem we had before, where we're batching up all these changes. They're much more complicated. So there's a lot more risk in trying to retrofit those in a couple of weeks. So falling behind is also quite risky because there's patches and things like that, security updates. So we need to have that reporting in place to make sure that we've got the stick to say you're falling behind, you need to update. We're hoping that things like enabling self-service for if a team is able to initiate their own updates, will that make them more likely to do so? And can we basically do some reporting against their peers to say, well, this business area is really good, they're used to working in an agile fashion, releasing their own code, whereas other teams are less likely to. So that's for me that sort of helps move from continuous integration and continuous delivery right through the deployment. And I think that the impact analysis step will give the additional information needed when working in an ITIL environment. So if you're still not sure, so just to give an example of that, so going back to my example about doing this big system. So absolutely critical system for the business. Any downtime would be disastrous. So while we were able to model the system with Puppet, and we were able to iterate over it really quickly. Before going live, we kind of got a bit cold feet. So brand new Puppet infrastructure, we didn't really have the tools and processes in place yet. But could we trust, did we have enough confidence that we could push changes to Puppet and roll that out across the environment without, fully understanding or knowing for certain that we weren't going to have a negative impact on the system? We decided that we didn't. So maybe that was just a timing thing. But that's probably the main reason why wrote Gonzo, which is this automated change impact thing. So I kind of chickened out. I'm not going to do the live demo. I'll just be talking into my laptop. So I'm going to try and keep up with my recording last night. If it's going to go. Whoop. See if I can play it. Good here. Okay. Just give me 1 second. I'll get full screen. Okay. Okay, so you can see that I've got a number of releases. They're the releases that are available on the Puppet Masters. The ones in green are ones that I can actually assign to servers. Let me start that again. Let's go. Okay. So red ones we're not allowed to use. You can see the nodes that have been deployed across each release. Don't worry if you can't read the, that's quite small text. You can see I've got 4 dev nodes on that release, 1 prod node on that release. And then I've got a list of how my nodes are across the different tiers. So I'm using the terminology tiers instead of environments just because environments is already have tiers in Puppet. So a list of all the nodes. So basically all the communication is done on the back end using mcollective. So you can see that nodes are updating as I'm sending in reports. I've got it at a quite high frequency at the moment, which you probably wouldn't do. Bearing in mind this is all running on my laptop, so about 13 machines on it. Your standard sort of node report, you can see revisions in the reports. I add a couple of extra facts in, so the release, the role, and the tier. See, I'm on revision 3000 something of that node, checking in quite often. Okay, so going back to the main screen, there we go. So if I look in a release, you can see how many nodes across each tier I've got deployed against it, how many I had available, and how many I've had analyzed. So this is basically what's going to be, I've checked against those to see what would be affected if I roll out that release. These other columns, you can see the number of hosts with high, medium, and low changes. Against a release, I can run the impact analysis, clear the results, and make the release unavailable. These are all the reports that come back after the impact analysis. So I can see that the master has 2 medium changes and 7 low. So the risk rating is quite subjective. We'll come on to that in a minute. But you can see that in the left column there. So I've rated the top change is a medium change. Down at the bottom you can see that it only applies to the master. So it's essentially the output of a no-op run, but in hopefully an easier to use format. So for example, this change, refresh on Puppet, would have affected 2 nodes. So if you go in and make a change, so I'm going to do a new feature. So basically I think the change is to, I'm going to enable NTP management in the base profile, so it should affect all nodes. So I'll commit that. So we use semantic versioning. So it's a new feature. So I'll increment the minor version, so 130, with a git tag. I'll push it up to GitHub. Because this is all running on my laptop, I've got a very simplified CI workflow. And not even CI, all it's doing is doing the deployment using bandwidth. So essentially this will just connect to GitHub, see the new tag. Normally it would build an artifact and extract that on my Puppet master. But in this case it'll just do a checkout. Okay, so just check out. I think this is correct. Okay, checking out all the submodules. All the code for the demo is on GitHub as well. It will set up a test environment. Okay, so the release isn't available yet through Gomza. It's on the file system. Okay, so it's there. So you can see that there's no analyze nodes. So we basically need to go in and run so no changes or reports, totally empty. So we run the impact analysis. So this will go out using mcollective. It basically gets put into a queue, goes out into mcollective, and all the nodes will do a no against the new release, and it will report back saying all the things that will be changing if I apply this release. So you can see all the reports coming in the background as well. So they'll keep coming in the background. So you can see I've now got a bunch of analyzed nodes. I still haven't raised any of the changes. Okay. So there are all the reports. So going back to the changes. Now this is kind of a manual process. You know, I think you want somebody to sort of eyeball each one and say, yes, I think that's a legitimate change. It's completely up to you how you would rate the changes. So maybe a low risk change is something that doesn't have any service impact. A medium might be something that bounces a service, and a high would be something that looks quite dangerous. So I'll just go in and rate them all. So that looks like a bit of a strange one. Only on the master. So I'm going to say that that's a high risk change. Okay. So you can now see all the ratings across the environments. So from this, you can now get a better picture of what your new release is going to impact when it goes across the environment. The next step, which fortunately I can't show you because I haven't written yet, is how you actually take this output and drive your change management system. So, you know, do something like saying, well, for all my dev nodes, I just want to release that across those. You know, all it is updating the ENC to new version of the release. So that's very simple to do. I think the challenging bit is when we are working in an ISO environment with change management, how do you bolt that into this workflow? So to say, well, I want to take all my evidence from what I've collected, put that into my change ticket, and then maybe as soon as the approval's been made, for it to ping back so that it does the ENC update. So essentially, that's as far as I've gotten. So for anybody interested, obviously Puppet uses dynamic environments, which I think is quite common, and collective on the back end for all the sort of communication. All the reports go to CouchDB, which is basically a JSON document store. And that database is replicated in real time into the web browser using something called PouchDB. So it's quite, Couch and Pouch are quite good in that they store multiple revisions of documents with only the incremental differences between versions. So it's quite space efficient, and I can go back anytime. So using Angular JS, which is Google's new web framework, and that gives you the instant updates in the GUI. Currently uses Rails, although there's only 2 API calls, so I'll probably get rid of that Snatter instead, and Rescue for the job scheduling. That's it. So I think I have plenty of time for questions. All the code's on GitHub. It's very new. Nobody knows about that yet. So I really hope people find it interesting and useful. And yeah, questions?
Could you say something about how your concept of tiers releases maps to the dynamic?
Yeah, sure. So on the Puppet Master, usually you have ETC Puppets environments. And there's almost always a production directory under that. Well, the dynamic environments is just having multiple, so where I've got my Git tag, that becomes a directory right next to production in the environment. And then there's some magic that you can use in puppet.conf to say, take the environment as configured either on command line or in your puppet.conf and substitute that in, and that becomes part of the one command. So it means that you can have dozens or hundreds even environments within your cpuppet directory.
But you're pointing individual nodes, specific releases,
Yes.
rather than the whole production environment is one release.
No. No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so I don't think it's appropriate, in my organization, it's not appropriate to say that we can update all of development or all of UAT to a given release at one time. So different applications are going to have different change windows, things like that. And different teams are going to have different thoughts on how quickly they want to release. So just by using an ENC, so within the ENC, which again I use CouchDB for, I just store the revision against that node in the ENC. Yeah.
My opinion on this is it seems to be that it's already based on an already working infrastructure, and you can make changes on it, and it's quite easy to do it and control it. But how do you do the start? So if you just building up the servers, you, for example, having an infrastructure which is not controlled with Puppet yet, and you want to make the change, is that going to be used for this? Because I see a high integration on your solution, but is it required to have already the fully puppetized environment, or do you
No, it definitely not. So, I mean, the question is, can you basically apply this to an existing infrastructure, so legacy infrastructure? Can you puppetize it? And, I definitely don't see why not. So, when we put the Puppet agent on all of our legacy software, we got it to manage the bare minimum. So basically it was managing the Puppet agent, the M-collective agent, and a couple of little bits and pieces. So, over time we'd start splitting out and saying, okay, now we're going to start managing sudoers or message of the day. But, we wouldn't be doing that big bang. We'd be doing that incremental changes. I think that, again, this is where it kind of helps out to make sure that as your configuration management sort of goes further and further on existing nodes, you know exactly what it's doing. So, basically we use roles and profiles to determine the level of Puppet management on the server. So, we would have like a profile base for anything that is fully Puppet managed, or we would have a profile legacy, which, it didn't have very much in it at all. Yeah.
Just trying to understand a bit of cover revenue.
So, sorry?
Into some change management processing. Do you mean like talking like processing like remedy or that sort of thing, or do you mean
Yeah. Yeah. Any of those systems, so ServiceNow, Remedy, things like that. So, it's when you have to, generate a ticket or a change request, that goes through a process, usually with approvers. Yeah, so,
approved in there or people call back?
yeah. A lot of these systems have hooks that let you do that. ServiceNow certainly does. And, why couldn't I call one of our web services that would then implement the change? Yeah.
When you do continuous delivery, you have multiple applications interacting each other.
Yeah.
What do you reckon is the best strategy for testing that with multiple pipelines? That's something I found more challenging.
Yeah, that is definitely challenging. So, I guess the question is, it's orchestration at the continuous integration layer. What do you need to have up and running to do those tests? So do you need your database to be available and things like that? Maybe it's a case of you need some permanent infrastructure in your CI test environment. I think that there's some other tools that you guys from Puppet Labs have been working on as well. I don't know if Beaker helps out there. Maybe one of the Puppet Labs guys knows. But you might need to have some permanent infrastructure layer for tests. Anybody else? No? Well, I guess that's it for me then. Does that make it lunchtime?